He exposed the dangerous budget cuts hiding behind political decisions. $960 billion in defense spending. Yet the Secretary of Defense hesitates to commit to congressional intent. What's the real cost of these budget cuts? You're about to see the truth behind the numbers and the risks to national security.
At this point, let me begin by asking Secretary Hegseth about congressional intent. We worry about the explicit choices that the Congress has made and that have been enacted into law by the president in the fiscal year 2026 budget. The decision came to us surprisingly to zero out destroyers, even though Congress intended for reconciliation to give the industrial base stability with a third DDG in fiscal years 2027 and in 2029. I've asked this of every nominee from the department who has come before us about honoring congressional intent. We will put funds in the reconciliation bill, working with the House and working with the administration to get the signature on the bill. And we will make clear alongside that the specific congressional intent. I've asked this of every official, and I will ask you as well, Mr. Secretary, do you commit to following congressional intent unequivocally on reconciliation?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Yes, our team looks forward to working with this committee, both through the budget process and reconciliation, and would acknowledge, just as a starting point of the conversation, that we are looking at 2 bills and 1 budget at the Defense Department. So as we have discussions about allocation, we may sometimes be talking about different numbers because of that, but from our perspective, we built a budget tied to $960 billion.
Are you qualifying your explicit yes? Because we have not had that from any of the other witnesses that have come before us. If our congressional intent, alongside the numbers in reconciliation, is explicitly expressed, do you commit to following congressional intent unequivocally in reconciliation?
Yes, we just wanted to clarify the entirety of the budget from our perspective.
Well, thank you very much. Now, you said once before that, and I quoted in my opening statement, Mr. Secretary, that going below 3% of GDP would be very dangerous. That was your testimony in January. Of course, you know well that we're asking our allies in Europe and NATO to go to 5%, and it has been the intention of most of us on the committee that the United States lead by example and, in fact, follow the peace through strength example of President Reagan and his administration in getting to 5%. I understand that if you put reconciliation and the budget requests together for this year, it exceeds 3%. But if we go back to that same baseline for the next 3 years after that, we'll be under 3%. We intend to fix that. But do you still agree that going below 3% would be a, quote, very dangerous, unquote, choice?
Yes, sir, and so does the President of the United States, which is why this budget increases from FY25 13%, puts us at 3.5% of GDP on defense, and we feel like is a generational increase in defense capabilities. And when you add that alongside the $30 billion we've already found in savings and repurposed, that's where I get to the $143 billion in additional spending in defense, which we think is substantial.
And you agree then, Mr. Secretary, that in future years, it would be very dangerous to go below that 3%?
As I said in my remarks, we're going to match our budget to threats. And so, yes, in the future, we anticipate threats like we have today. And so I would anticipate a robust budget in the future. Yes.
Would you please be kind enough to answer my question? Would going below 3% in future fiscal years be, quote, very dangerous, unquote, as you said in your statement in January?
Yes, sir, and I believe the President of the United States definitely feels the same way.
Thank you, sir.
What you just witnessed was a battle of words, where the Secretary of Defense was cornered by Senator Kelly on the crucial issue of following congressional intent in the defense budget. The Secretary was pushed to commit to honoring the will of Congress, especially in terms of the $25 billion budget for destroyers, a project explicitly laid out by Congress to ensure the industrial base remained stable. Yet, despite all the pressure, the Secretary hesitated, offering a vague answer about the starting point of the conversation. This is not the kind of leadership we need when it comes to our national defense. Let's break this down. The issue at hand is the misalignment between the executive branch's budget proposals and the legislative decisions made by Congress. Congress explicitly intended for certain defense projects, such as the funding for destroyers in fiscal years 2027 and 2029, to be protected. However, instead of honoring that commitment, the Secretary of Defense seemed willing to negotiate away these critical priorities. The question is, why? Why are we suddenly willing to jeopardize vital military projects that were laid out with clear bipartisan support? This is where the systemic problem lies. Institutions like the Department of Defense are supposed to protect the interests of the American people. But here, we see an executive branch that appears to be willing to undermine the decisions made by Congress, especially when it comes to military priorities. The Secretary's vague responses and refusal to give a straight answer only raise more concerns about the true motivations behind the budget cuts. Is the Pentagon prioritizing personal agendas or real defense needs? Then we dive deeper into the 3% GDP commitment for defense spending. The Secretary stated that going below 3% would be very dangerous, yet when pressed about future years, he did not give a straight answer. Is this an administration that is committed to sustaining the military strength that keeps Americans safe? Or are we seeing the gradual erosion of defense spending as political decisions take precedence over national security? This is about more than just numbers. This is about the security of the nation. What happens if we cut too deeply? What happens if we fail to meet the necessary spending commitments? The Secretary of Defense seems to be walking a fine line, carefully avoiding hard commitments to future defense budgets. What message does that send to our enemies? That are we not ready for the challenges ahead? That our defenses are not as robust as they should be to confront the growing threats we face? What's even more troubling is the political dance happening behind the scenes. The Secretary of Defense claimed that the President and his administration are fully committed to meeting the defense budget requirements. But when pressed about congressional intent, the answer was unclear. Why are we seeing such a lack of clarity? Is this an attempt to bypass Congress to achieve lower spending? Or is this a sign of deeper dysfunction within our defense apparatus? It's also crucial to point out the long-term consequences of cutting defense spending below 3% of GDP. The Secretary's reluctance to confirm the danger of such a decision speaks volumes. If we compromise on defense spending now, what kind of military readiness will we have in the future? Are we preparing for war or preparing to be caught unprepared? The emotional weight of this situation is undeniable. American service members rely on the resources and training provided by Congress to defend our country. Cutting funding for essential defense projects like destroyers and missile systems puts their lives and the lives of civilians at risk. We owe it to our military to ensure they have the best resources to defend this nation. We cannot afford to risk their safety over political budget cuts. The real victims here are not just military personnel. They are all Americans who rely on a strong defense to protect their way of life. We are talking about the future of our national security, and the cost of inaction is too high. Why would we let this happen? Why are we allowing political agendas to interfere with the defense of this country? Why are we cutting corners when it comes to protecting Americans? We need to hold the Secretary of Defense accountable. This isn't about politics. This is about ensuring the safety and security of every American citizen. No one is above the Constitution, and no one should be above the need to protect our country. The Secretary must honor the will of Congress, and he must commit to the full funding that our national defense requires. We cannot afford to let this issue slide. The stakes are simply too high. Share this video and spread the truth. Subscribe to stay updated on this vital issue, and stay loud, because the security of this nation depends on it. We must demand accountability from our leaders. The future of our military and our nation is at risk, and we must take action before it's too late.